Friday night was meant to be simple. Rachel and I were heading to the Ivy, a familiar spot where we often met up with our group of friends. To be honest, I wasn't really in the mood for socializing. Work had drained me and all I wanted was to stay in, crack open a cold beer, and mindlessly binge-watch something. But Rachel wasn't having it. "We need to go out more, Daniel," she insisted, already slipping into a sleek black dress and carefully applying her signature red lipstick. Her tone left no room for debate. By the time we arrived, the place was alive with energy. Our usual crew was there: Samantha, Rachel's best friend, whose dramatic flair knew no bounds, Ryan, the loud, ever-joking one, and a few others who drifted in and out of our circle. As expected, Rachel took center stage the moment we walked in. She moved through conversations effortlessly, her laughter ringing out, her presence magnetic. She knew how to draw people in, and tonight, she seemed to be enjoying it even more than usual. I tried to join in, but it felt like I was invisible. My jokes didn't land, my attempts at conversation were constantly overshadowed. Every time I spoke, Rachel would interject with something wittier, something that pulled the attention back to her. This wasn't new. Rachel had a way of commanding a room, but something about tonight felt off. Her laughter was louder, her touches lingered longer, and, most unsettling of all, she hadn't looked at me once. Midway through the night, I noticed her phone. It rested face down on the table, vibrating intermittently. Each time, Rachel would glance at it and smile, a smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. But she didn't pick it up, just let it buzz as if she were savoring some private amusement. "Who keeps texting you?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. Rachel didn't even glance up. "Work stuff," she said flatly. "At this hour?" Finally, she met my eyes, her expression cold and dismissive. "It's a campaign, Daniel. Deadlines don't clock out. Can we not do this right now?" I let it go, but a tight knot formed in my stomach. Then, out of nowhere, Rachel stood up and tapped her glass with a spoon. The conversation around us quieted as everyone turned to her, expecting one of her usual quick-witted remarks or a funny anecdote. Instead, she lifted her glass and said, "To Daniel, the man who, honestly, puts up with more than anyone should. Cheers to patience." The silence that followed was brief but thick. Ryan forced a laugh, and the others quickly followed suit, but I wasn't laughing. I was frozen. Her words weren't lighthearted, they were edged with something sharper, something I wasn't in on. I wanted to confront her right then and there, but with all eyes on me, I forced a thin smile and raised my glass. Inside, I felt like I'd just been struck. As soon as she sat down, I leaned in close. "What was that about?" She didn't even flinch. "Relax, Daniel. It was a joke. You need to lighten up. Humiliating me in front of our friends is a joke?" Before she could respond, her phone buzzed again. This time, she picked it up, her fingers moving swiftly over the screen. I pushed back from the table. "I need some air," I muttered, standing abruptly. Stepping outside, I let the cool night air hit me as the sounds of the bar faded into the background. My mind was racing. Was I overreacting? Maybe I was just being paranoid, but that toast, it wasn't normal. Before I could untangle my thoughts, my phone vibrated in my pocket. A message from Rachel. "Are you okay? You know I love you, right?" I stared at the screen, my pulse quickening. The words felt off, empty, like they were meant to smooth things over rather than actually reassure me. And for the first time, I didn't reply. Something was going on, something she wasn't telling me. And I was going to find out what. Determined, I headed back inside. The atmosphere felt different now, like I'd stepped into a room where everyone knew a secret except me. Rachel was back at the table, but her phone was nowhere in sight. She was deep in conversation with Samantha, who kept sneaking glances at me, amused, almost pitying. Whatever they were discussing, I clearly wasn't meant to hear it. Ryan spotted me and waved. "Daniel, man, grab another drink. You look like you've seen a ghost." I forced a chuckle, shook my head, and went straight to the bar. I ordered a whiskey, hoping it would settle my nerves, and kept my focus on Rachel. Her laughter rang out sharp and deliberate. It wasn't for me. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, some kind of slip, a crack in her performance, something to explain why everything suddenly felt so wrong. Then I saw it. Samantha slid Rachel's phone across the table. Rachel glanced at it only for a split second before flipping it face down again, her lips curling slightly as if suppressing a smile. I couldn't take it anymore. Heart pounding, I walked over and leaned in. "We're leaving. Now." Rachel looked up, her face unreadable. "We just got here. Don't be such a buzzkill." Samantha smirked, lazily sipping her drink. "Oh, come on, Daniel. Let her have some fun. She's been working so hard lately." That was it. "Rachel, let's go. Or I will." She rolled her eyes, tossing her napkin onto the table. "Fine. If it's that important to you." We left without acknowledging anyone, the sharp clicks of her heels echoing against the pavement as we made our way to the car. A heavy silence settled between us, thick and suffocating. Once inside, she crossed her arms and turned toward the window, her posture stiff like an irritated teenager refusing to engage. I gripped the wheel, my patience wearing thin. "Rachel, what is going on?" She turned her head slightly, her eyes narrowing. "What are you talking about?" I exhaled sharply. "Don't play dumb. The toast, the texts, the way you've been acting for weeks. Something's going on, and I want to know what it is." Her lips curled into a smirk, cold, almost mocking. "God, Daniel, you're so paranoid. Not everything revolves around you." My hands tightened around the wheel, my knuckles turning white. "Then what is it about? Because it sure as hell feels like you're hiding something." She said nothing. Instead, she turned her gaze back to the window, shutting me out completely. My jaw clenched as I started the car, frustration simmering beneath the surface. When we arrived home, Rachel went straight to the bathroom, shutting the door behind her with a decisive click. I stood in the middle of the living room, my eyes drifting to her purse, which she had carelessly tossed onto the couch. My hands trembled, my mind racing with thoughts I didn't want to entertain. Before I could stop myself, I reached for it. Of course, her phone wasn't inside. She had taken it with her. But her work tablet was there, resting in the open and unlocked. A war raged in my mind, my conscience telling me to leave it alone. But there was another voice, louder, insistent. "You already know something's wrong, Daniel. Just confirm it." With shaking hands, I opened her messages. Nothing suspicious. Email? All work-related. I was about to close it when something caught my eye, an unfamiliar app, one I didn't recognize. The name was unassuming, nothing that stood out. Curious, I tapped on it. My blood ran cold. The first message was from an unsaved number. "Him, last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about you." "Rachel, me too. Same time next week." A sharp breath left my lungs. My fingers trembled as I scrolled upward, hoping, praying this was some kind of misunderstanding. But there was no room for doubt. The messages were clear, undeniable. Each line carved into me like a blade, confirming what I had been too afraid to admit. And then the bathroom door unlocked. Rachel stepped into the living room, drying her hands with a towel, only to freeze the moment she saw me holding her tablet. Her eyes darted to the screen, her face betraying a flicker of something shock, guilt, but it was gone in an instant, replaced by an icy detachment. Her voice was sharp. "What the hell are you doing?" I stood up, my chest rising and falling with each heavy breath. I held the tablet toward her, the messages glowing like an accusation. "This. What is this, Rachel?" Her expression remained unreadable, but she crossed her arms, her lips curling into that same cruel smirk. "Are you seriously snooping through my stuff now?" "That's pathetic, Daniel." I clenched my jaw. "Don't you dare turn this on me. You've been lying to me." "For how long, Rachel? Weeks? Months?" She didn't answer. The silence was deafening. Then she shrugged, her tone as cold as her expression. "Does it matter?" That was the moment everything shattered. I stared at her, barely able to process the weight of those words. My grip on the tablet tightened as if holding onto it would somehow keep me steady. "What the hell is that supposed to mean?" "Of course it matters." She rolled her eyes, exasperated, as if this was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. "Daniel, you're overreacting. It's not that big of a deal." Heat surged through me. "Not that big of a deal? You're sneaking around, meeting up with some guy, and you think it's not a big deal." Her smirk deepened, dripping with condescension. "All right, you want the truth? Fine. Yes, I've been seeing someone. And honestly, I don't even know why you're so shocked. You've been checked out for months." I stepped back as if the words had physically struck me. "Checked out? Are you serious? I've been working my ass off to keep this house, this life, us together. And this is what you do?" I shook the tablet, the weight of betrayal heavy in my grip. Rachel remained unfazed. She simply shrugged again. "Well, maybe if you had paid a little more attention to me, I wouldn't have had to look elsewhere." Something inside me snapped. I slammed the tablet down on the coffee table, the loud crack of impact cutting through the tension. "Don't you dare put this on me. You made this choice. You decided to lie. This is on you, Rachel." She didn't flinch. Her expression was stone cold. "Oh, spare me the self-righteous act, Daniel. You're not some saint. You've been so obsessed with your precious job that you didn't even notice how unhappy I was. You don't talk to me. You don't make me feel wanted. What did you expect?" I shook my head in disbelief. "Unhappy? You could have told me. You could have talked to me, Rachel. You didn't have to destroy our marriage just because you felt neglected." She let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Talk to you? Please. You don't listen, Daniel. You just nod, say, yeah, sure, and go back to your emails or whatever else is so important to you." She met my gaze, her eyes empty of any remorse. Face it, Daniel. We've been done for a while. You were just too blind to see it. My legs buckled and I collapsed into the armchair, staring at her in shock. This was it? She had decided it was over, and instead of telling me outright, she had chosen to sneak around behind my back? My voice was raw with disbelief as I demanded, was it worth it, Rachel? Was he worth it? For the first time, the confidence she had worn like armor faltered. She turned away, her jaw tightening. I don't owe you an explanation, she said, her voice clipped. Like hell you don't. I shot back, pushing myself to my feet. Who is he? Tell me. She hesitated for a moment before exhaling as if the whole conversation bored her. Fine. If you must know, it's Derek. From work. Derek. The name hit like a slap. I knew exactly who he was, one of the marketing guys she had mentioned occasionally. Someone she had always described as harmless, a bit of a dork. My hands clenched into fists as the realization sank in. While I had been working myself to the bone to keep us afloat, he had been texting my wife behind my back. That's who you're willing to risk everything for? Derek? My voice dripped with disbelief. Rachel smirked. He listens to me, Daniel. He makes me feel appreciated. Something you forgot how to do. Her words were like poison, and I felt them seeping into my veins, choking me. Appreciated? I scoffed. You really think he appreciates you? He's using you, Rachel. Just like you're using him. And when this all comes crashing down, don't expect me to be here waiting. Her expression darkened with genuine anger. You think you're better than me, don't you? Like you're some perfect husband? Well, newsflash, Daniel, you're not. You're predictable, dull, and honestly, exhausting. I needed something more. It felt like the ground beneath me had shattered. This wasn't just betrayal, it was the complete destruction of everything I thought we had built together. I forced myself to take a deep breath, but the air felt too thick, too heavy. You're unbelievable, I muttered, shaking my head. You've destroyed us, Rachel. And for what? Someone who's probably already planning his next affair? She shrugged, her indifference returning in full force. Maybe he is. Maybe he isn't. But at least with him I feel alive. That word echoed in my mind, taunting me. Alive. Get out. My voice was low, cold. Her eyebrows shot up. Excuse me? I said get out, Rachel. I met her gaze, unflinching. Go stay with Derek. Go feel alive with him. Just get out of my house. For a moment, she looked like she might argue. Then, with deliberate slowness, she grabbed her purse and keys. Fine. I'll go. But don't think for a second that this is all on me, Daniel. You pushed me to this. I didn't respond. Couldn't. I just watched as she walked out the door, slamming it behind her. The silence that followed was unbearable. I sank back into the chair, my eyes falling on the tablet still sitting on the table. The messages stared back at me, glaring like an open wound that refused to heal. And for the first time in years, I felt completely, utterly alone. The next morning, the house felt unnervingly quiet. The faint scent of Rachel's perfume still lingered in the air, a cruel reminder of her presence, of the life we had shared. But now she was gone. Off to wherever Derek was. I had barely slept. My mind had raced through the night, replaying every word, every moment from our argument. The look in her eyes, the way she walked away so effortlessly as if this wasn't the collapse of everything we had built but just another petty disagreement. It was as though she had been preparing her exit for months and I had only just caught up. By the time the clock hit 7, I couldn't take lying in bed any longer. I dragged myself up, pulled on an old hoodie, and made my way to the kitchen. The coffee pot sputtered as it brewed, but I barely heard it. My thoughts ran in endless circles. Had I really been that blind? Had I missed the warning signs? Or had Rachel simply become an expert at deception? Then my phone buzzed. I grabbed it without thinking, hoping for, what exactly? An apology? Some trace of guilt? It wasn't from Rachel. It was Ryan. Dude, are you okay? Last night was intense. I stared at the screen for a moment before setting the phone down without replying. What could I even say? Instead, my fingers instinctively scrolled through my contacts until they stopped on Samantha's name. Her smug little smile at the bar the night before stuck with me. She knew. She had to. Before I could talk myself out of it, I hit the call button. After a few rings, she answered, her voice groggy. Daniel? It's early. What's up? You tell me, I said flatly. You seemed pretty comfortable with Rachel last night. Want to explain what's really going on? A pause. Then a sigh. Daniel, I don't want to get involved in this. It's between you and Rachel. Don't give me that, I snapped. You've been her best friend for years. You knew about Derek, didn't you? Another pause, longer this time. Then finally, look. Rachel confided in me. I didn't think it was my place to say anything. My grip tightened around the phone. So, what, you just sat there grinning while she made a fool out of me? Samantha groaned. Daniel, don't do this. You have your side of the story, but Rachel, she's been unhappy for a long time. You had to see this coming. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. See it coming? My voice was hollow. What are you even talking about? She felt ignored, Daniel. Like she didn't matter. You were so consumed by your own reality that you never noticed hers crumbling around her. But that wasn't an excuse. My patience snapped. If she had been unhappy, she could have spoken to me instead of running to some sleazy guy from her office. Maybe she should have, Samantha shot back, her voice sharper now. But let's not act like you're completely innocent in this. Relationships aren't one-sided, Daniel. I couldn't take it anymore. You know what? Forget it. Go ahead and keep defending her. You're no better than she is. Before she could respond, I ended the call, my heart hammering in my chest. The room seemed to shrink, the air heavy. Samantha's words clashed with Rachel's from the night before, swirling in my mind. Was I really at fault? Had I ignored something obvious? No. This wasn't on me. I wasn't the one who broke trust. I hadn't lied, snuck around, or humiliated her in front of people we both cared about. Sure, I wasn't perfect, but I didn't deserve this. Anger simmered beneath the surface again as I grabbed my phone, scrolling until Rachel's name appeared. My thumb hovered over the call button. A part of me wanted to shout, demand explanations, force her to own up to what she had done. Instead, I typed a message. You need to come by and get your things. Tell me when. I don't want to see you, so make sure I'm not here. Her reply came almost instantly. I'll figure it out. Don't worry, I don't want to see you either. That hurt more than I expected. Even now she showed no remorse, no kindness. I stared at my screen, my coffee growing cold on the table. For the first time since this nightmare began, the weight pressing down on me wasn't just anger or betrayal, it was grief. Grief for the life we had built. For the person I had believed her to be. For the version of myself that had trusted in us, even when the cracks had started to show. Sunlight streamed through the window, bright and indifferent. And that's when it truly hit me, this wasn't just the end of my marriage. It was the end of who I had been for the past 6 years. By midday, the house was silent, but my thoughts were anything but. I couldn't sit still. I tried to keep busy, cleaning dishes that were already spotless, folding laundry I didn't need to fold, but nothing eased the restlessness. Every room, every corner held a memory of Rachel, each one a fresh wound. The tablet sat on the coffee table like a ghost of the night before, its screen dark now, but the words burned into my mind. Last night was amazing. Her response. Same time next week? A tremor ran through my hands as I thought about it. She had intended to continue, to keep up the facade, to treat our life as nothing more than an inconvenience. I needed answers. I picked up the tablet again, diving into her apps, her messages, her emails. It wouldn't change anything, but I had to know. I had to see how deep the lies went. Her calendar caught my attention first. Dates marked with harmless little notes. Meeting. Late dinner. Office event. But they didn't align with the rest of her work schedule. These weren't real business obligations. They were cover stories. My stomach twisted as I realized the effort she had put into deceiving me. Then the emails. Most were about work, but a few stood out. One was from Derek. Looking forward to tonight. Should we take separate cars again? Rachel's reply. Yeah. Can't have Daniel getting suspicious. LOL. I nearly threw the tablet across the room. It wasn't just betrayal, it was mockery. She had known exactly what she was doing. And she hadn't cared. But the worst part? It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about how little I had mattered to her. How easy it had been for her to laugh at the web of lies she had spun. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. A message from Ryan. Dude, you sure you're okay? We're here if you need anything. Ryan. Always the loyal friend. He didn't know the full extent of this mess, and I wasn't ready to explain it all. I typed back. Not great, man. But thanks. I'll be fine. I wouldn't be fine. Not for a long time. The rest of the day passed in a haze. At some point, I tried to eat, but every bite turned to ash in my mouth. My thoughts looped back to Rachel, to her lies, to the emptiness in her eyes when she walked away. How did someone who once claimed to love me become a stranger? And then, late in the afternoon, I heard the sound of her car pulling into the driveway. A sharp wave of panic shot through me. She wasn't supposed to be here today. I hadn't had time to prepare myself, to shove down the emotions still clawing at my chest. The front door opened. And there she was, standing in the hallway looking completely unfazed. I'm here for my stuff, she said, her voice flat. I folded my arms, my stance firm. You couldn't have called first? Her eyes flicked to mine, a flicker of irritation crossing her face. I didn't think I needed your permission, Daniel. You didn't, I replied coolly. But a little warning would have been considerate. She shrugged, stepping past me toward the bedroom. I'll be quick. I kept my distance as I followed her, unable to look away despite the growing ache in my chest. Every movement she made seemed detached, her hands mechanically pulling clothes from the closet, her face unreadable. She packed in silence, and I couldn't hold back any longer. So, this is it? No explanation? No apology? Just packing up like this is nothing more than a routine breakup. She hesitated for a moment, a dress hanging loosely from her fingers, before turning to face me. What do you want me to say, Daniel? That I'm sorry? That I regret it? Because I don't. I did what I had to do. I let out a humorless laugh, though there was nothing amusing about any of this. You mean lying to me? Humiliating me? Throwing away everything we built for what? A meaningless fling. Her eyes narrowed. You really don't get it, do you? This was never about Derek. This was about me realizing I deserved to be happy. And you? You were never going to make me happy. Her words landed like a blow, knocking the air from my lungs. You think this makes you happy? Sneaking around, lying, destroying everything we had? She turned away, tossing the dress into her suitcase without a second glance. I didn't come here to argue, Daniel. Just let me pack and go. I stood there, trembling with anger, disbelief coursing through me. You're a coward, Rachel. You didn't do what you had to do, you took the easy way out. Instead of fixing things, you ran. And the worst part? You don't even care. For the first time, I saw something flicker in her expression, guilt maybe. But just as quickly, she buried it. Believe whatever you want, Daniel, but I'm done explaining myself to you. With that, she zipped up her suitcase, grabbed it, and walked out. No final words, no last glance. Just the sound of the door closing behind her. I didn't follow. I didn't shout. I didn't break down. I just stood there, frozen, listening as her car pulled out of the driveway and disappeared into the night. It was over. Completely over. But in that moment, a deeper realization hit me. I hadn't just lost Rachel, I had lost the illusion of who she was. And maybe that was what hurt the most. The silence she left behind wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. The house felt cavernous, swallowing me whole. Everywhere I looked, remnants of her lingered, her favorite mug sitting on the counter, the throw blanket she always curled up with draped over the couch, the faint scent of her perfume still clinging to the curtains. I sank onto the living room couch, staring at the empty space where her suitcase had been, my mind spiraling. Anger clashed with grief, twisting into something darker. How had I missed this? How had I been so blind to the fractures she claimed had always been there? Her words echoed in my head, relentless. You were never going to make me happy. I deserve to be happy. You pushed me to this. Maddening. As if she were the victim in all this. As if her betrayal was justified because I wasn't enough. I needed an escape, something, anything, to keep my thoughts from consuming me. Without thinking, I grabbed my keys and walked out the door. The cold evening air hit my face like a slap. I drove without direction, not caring where I ended up. The streets blurred together, neon lights streaking past my windshield in a haze. Eventually, I found myself parked outside a bar. Not the Ivy, thank God. Just some small, rundown place I had never set foot in before. Inside, the air was thick with smoke and the lingering scent of stale beer. It wasn't inviting, but that didn't matter. I ordered a whiskey and retreated to a shadowed booth in the corner, keeping my head low. The burn of the alcohol did little to dull the storm raging inside me. As I nursed my drink, I pulled out my phone. Against my better judgment, I opened Rachel's social media. Nothing yet. No cryptic quotes, no perfectly curated snapshots of her fresh start. But I knew she was out there somewhere, already weaving the perfect narrative for herself. Then a thought struck me. Derek. I didn't hesitate. I searched his profile, and there he was, smug, polished, the type of guy who probably spent more time perfecting his hair than doing actual work. His posts were predictable, gym selfies, corporate event pictures, motivational quotes that made me cringe. But then something caught my eye. A post from last week, taken at a restaurant I didn't recognize. The caption read, "Great night with even better company." A wineglass emoji followed. And there it was. Rachel's name tagged in the comments. Alongside a heart. My grip on the glass tightened until I thought it might shatter. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't impulsive. This was deliberate. Planned. And they weren't even trying to hide it. A voice cut through my thoughts. Rough night? I looked up to see the bartender, a middle-aged man with a worn face, standing near my table. He gestured toward my nearly empty glass. You look like you could use another. I gave a slight nod and he refilled it. You want to talk about it? He asked, leaning against the booth. Normally, I would have brushed him off. But tonight, I couldn't hold it in. My wife cheated on me, I said bluntly. With some guy from her office. He let out a low whistle, shaking his head in disbelief. That's rough, man. Did you confront her? Oh, I did, I replied, the bitterness in my tone impossible to miss. She didn't even try to deny it. Instead, she acted like it was my fault, like I had somehow pushed her into doing it. The bartender's expression darkened as he frowned. People like that don't take responsibility for their actions. It's always easier to shift the blame onto someone else. I nodded, appreciating his words even though they did little to ease the ache inside me. I don't know what to do now. She's gone, but it doesn't feel like it's over. He tapped the edge of the table thoughtfully. It won't feel over until you decide it is. People like her? They'll keep dragging you down if you let them. Don't give her that power. His words stayed with me as I finished my drink, and for the first time that night, I felt a sliver of clarity. Rachel had taken so much from me, my trust, my peace, my sense of stability, but I wasn't about to let her take my future, too. As I stepped out of the bar, a newfound determination settled in. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Divorce papers, dividing our lives, dealing with the inevitable questions from friends and family, it was all waiting for me. But one thing was certain, Rachel had made her choice. Now it was my turn to make mine. I refused to be just another casualty in her story. The next morning, I woke up with a kind of clarity that only comes after hitting rock bottom. Rachel's words still lingered, their sting undeniable, but something inside me had shifted. She was no longer here to manipulate the narrative, to twist my guilt and insecurities into something she could use to her advantage. This was my story now, and I had decisions to make. The first step was making a call. The moment the line connected, I spoke without hesitation. I need to start the divorce process. The words tasted bitter, but they were necessary. Victoria, a no-nonsense lawyer, listened carefully as I explained everything: Rachel's affair, her cold dismissal of our marriage, and the sheer lack of remorse she had shown. Victoria didn't flinch. She had clearly heard worse, but her calm, professional demeanor was exactly what I needed. Start gathering any documents you have, she instructed. Bank statements, joint accounts, property deeds, anything that ties the two of you together financially. And if you have proof of her infidelity, that could help with negotiations. The proof was there, those messages from Derek, the texts on her tablet. They were more than enough. A part of me hesitated. Was it too harsh to use them against her? But then I remembered her laughter at my expense, her indifference to the damage she had done. She had treated me as nothing more than an obstacle in her pursuit of happiness. I wasn't playing fair anymore. With Victoria's guidance, I spent the next several hours sorting through every shared document, every email, every financial record that connected Rachel and me. It felt clinical, like dissecting the remains of our relationship, but at the same time it was empowering. For the first time in weeks, I was taking control. Then came the second step. I grabbed my phone and sent a message to Ryan. Need to talk. Can we meet? Ryan, of course. My place in an hour. An hour later, I was sitting on his couch, laying everything out for him. Ryan listened in silence, his usual easygoing nature replaced with something more serious. When I finally finished, he exhaled heavily. Man, he muttered, shaking his head. I had no idea it was that bad. Rachel? She really did that to you? I stared down at the floor. Yeah. And the worst part? She didn't even care. She just left like it was nothing. Ryan ran a hand through his hair, still processing. That's cold, Daniel. Really cold. But you know what? You're handling it better than I would. I would have lost it. I managed a weak smile. Oh, trust me. I've had my moments. Ryan hesitated for a moment before speaking again. You know, Samantha's been acting weird, too. I don't know if she's directly involved in this whole thing with Rachel, but something feels off. My stomach tightened. Samantha, Rachel's best friend, her confidant, the same one who had smirked at me that night at the bar. She knew more than she had let on. I was certain of it. You think she knew? I asked, already bracing myself for the answer. Ryan nodded slowly. If she didn't, I'd be shocked. Samantha and Rachel are like two sides of the same coin. If Rachel was sneaking around, Samantha was probably covering for her. That sealed it. Samantha was next. The confrontation. Later that afternoon, I dialed Samantha's number. She picked up on the second ring, her tone unnaturally chipper, as if she had been expecting me. Well, if it isn't Daniel, she said, amusement laced in her voice. How's life in the drama zone? I didn't waste time. Cut the act, Samantha, I said, my voice firm. We need to talk. In person. Her tone shifted, the playful edge faltering. Sure. What's this about? You know exactly what it's about. Silence stretched between us. Then she let out a quiet sigh. Fine. Meet me at the coffee shop on 5th. When I arrived, Samantha was already there, casually sipping an iced latte, scrolling through her phone as if she didn't have a care in the world. As I approached, she glanced up, her expression unreadable. "So," she said, setting her drink down. "What's on your mind?" I didn't hesitate. "You knew," I said, taking a seat across from her. "You knew about Rachel and Derek, didn't you?" Samantha didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned back, crossing her arms over her chest. "And if I did?" she asked, her voice void of remorse. "What difference does it make now?" My hands clenched into fists beneath the table. "You really think it doesn't matter? You stood by her side, covered for her, and let her humiliate me without saying a single word." My voice was edged with frustration. Samantha let out an exasperated sigh, rolling her eyes. "Daniel, you're making this into something bigger than it is." Rachel was miserable, she needed a way out. I didn't approve of how she handled it, but it wasn't my place to interfere. "Not your place." My voice rose in disbelief. "You sat there, laughing with her while she lied right to my face. How's that not your place?" Samantha leaned forward, her expression turning cold. "Listen, Daniel, I understand that you're hurt. But maybe instead of blaming me, you should ask yourself why Rachel felt like she couldn't be honest with you in the first place. Relationships don't just fall apart for no reason. That was it. The final blow." I pushed my chair back, standing up and glaring down at her. "Defend her all you want, Samantha. But when she moves on to her next escape, don't come running back with excuses. You made your choice." Without waiting for a response, I turned on my heel and strode out of the coffee shop. My footsteps echoed in my ears as I stepped into the cold air. And in that moment, it hit me, I hadn't just lost Rachel. I'd lost Samantha too. Or maybe, deep down, I never really had her. But it didn't matter anymore. The truth was becoming clearer, and I wouldn't let anyone else twist the story of what had happened. The days that followed my confrontation with Samantha were a blur of emotions. Anger and betrayal still burned within me, but now they were accompanied by something new, determination. This was no longer just about surviving the wreckage of Rachel's betrayal, it was about reclaiming my life, one step at a time. I threw myself into the divorce process. Victoria worked swiftly, filing the necessary paperwork and walking me through every step. It felt like unraveling a life I had spent years building, every closed account, every divided asset, every painful memory cataloged and sorted. It was exhausting, but the worst part was the silence. Rachel never called, never texted. It was as if I had been erased from her life overnight. And maybe that was what hurt the most, not just the betrayal, but how easily she had walked away, leaving only unanswered questions in her wake. Then, one evening, my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. "Hello?" My voice was cautious. "Daniel." I froze. It was Rachel. My grip tightened around the phone, my chest constricting. "What do you want?" Her tone was calm, almost indifferent. "Victoria sent me the divorce papers. I just wanted to let you know I'll be signing them. No need to drag this out." Her words were devoid of emotion, cold, detached. A fresh wave of anger surged through me. "That's it? No explanation? No apology? Just a signature and you're done?" She sighed, the sound heavy with impatience. "What do you want me to say, Daniel? That I'm sorry? That I regret it? I don't." This was inevitable. I repeated her word in disbelief. "Inevitable? You cheated on me, Rachel. You spent months lying to my face, and now you act like this was just bound to happen? Like I deserved it." A long pause followed. Then she finally spoke. "I didn't call to argue. I called to make this easier. You want closure? Fine. I'm signing the papers. End of story." I let out a bitter laugh. "You think a piece of paper gives me closure? You think it erases everything you did?" Her voice hardened. "You're the one who wanted this over with. Now it is. Stop dragging it out, Daniel. It's pathetic." And then she hung up. I stood there, staring at my phone. The silence of the call cut deeper than her words. This wasn't just indifference, it was intentional cruelty. She wanted to make me feel powerless. And for a brief moment I did. But only for a moment. I paced the house, her words playing over in my mind. Something didn't add up. If Rachel was so eager to move on, why bother calling at all? Why not just sign the papers and be done with it? Then it hit me. She wasn't in control anymore, and she hated it. Signing those papers wasn't just about ending our marriage, it was about losing her grip over me. And that realization gave me strength. The next day, I sat down with Victoria and went over every single detail of the divorce settlement. "Make sure she doesn't walk away from this untouched," I said firmly. "She doesn't get to destroy my life and keep everything intact." Victoria gave me a knowing nod. "We'll make sure it's fair, Daniel. But be ready, if she's as cold as you say, she won't go down without a fight." And fight she did. Rachel contested nearly every aspect of the settlement, Our house, the smallest shared assets, anything she could cling to. Her emails to Victoria dripped with venom, painting me as spiteful and vindictive. But this time I didn't back down. A week later, my phone rang again. This time it was Samantha. "I thought you should know," she said, her voice laced with fake concern. "Rachel's been telling people you're trying to ruin her life. She's saying you're dragging out the divorce just to punish her." I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Of course, she is. That's her pattern, isn't it? Always the victim." That moment, a single thought solidified in my mind: let everyone else be the villain. Samantha hesitated before speaking, her tone cautious. "Listen, Daniel, I know you're upset. You don't know anything," I snapped, my patience gone. "You're just as guilty as she is. So don't call me acting like you care." Before she could respond, I ended the call. That night, something within me shifted. I refused to let Rachel or those siding with her twist the truth, painting me as the antagonist in a story she wanted to control. I wasn't going to let them rewrite my life. Determined, I opened my laptop and pulled together every shred of proof I had: messages, emails, photos, organizing them meticulously into a single folder. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about hurting her. It was about safeguarding myself, ensuring that if she dared to distort the truth any further, I had the facts on my side. When I was finished, I leaned back and exhaled deeply. The fury still simmered, the hurt remained, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of control. Rachel might try to twist the narrative, but I wouldn't let her. This wasn't the ending she had envisioned, but it was the one she had earned. 2 weeks later, the divorce negotiations hit a breaking point. True to form, Rachel wasn't just battling for what she believed she deserved, she was fighting to keep hold of her version of the story. Her lawyer sent an email filled with accusations, painting me as vindictive, claiming I was intentionally stalling to make her life miserable. Without hesitation, I forwarded it to Victoria with a simple instruction. Use everything we've got. Victoria didn't miss a beat. The next day, she submitted the evidence: screenshots of Rachel's conversations with Derek, calendar entries that contradicted her supposed work schedule, even financial records proving she had spent our shared savings on what was most likely their secret getaways. By the end of the week, the tone of Rachel's legal team shifted. Her lawyers sent a counteroffer, one noticeably more restrained. As Victoria read it aloud, a smirk played on her lips. Seems like someone had a sudden change of heart. But I wasn't done. This had moved beyond finances or assets. This was about the truth. The dinner party bombshell. That Friday, Ryan and a few friends invited me over for dinner. They said it was to help take my mind off things, though I knew they were just as intrigued by the unfolding drama. I didn't mind. I needed a night out, even if the idea of facing everyone exhausted me. When I arrived, Ryan greeted me with his signature bear hug. "Good to see you, man. You're looking better, more alive." I managed a small smile, taking it one day at a time. As the evening progressed and the wine flowed, the conversation inevitably steered toward Rachel. Ryan was the first to bring it up, his voice dropping as if sharing a scandalous secret. "So, Samantha's been talking," he said, glancing at me. "Apparently Rachel's been telling people you're out for blood." I leaned back in my chair, unfazed. Let her talk. She doesn't have a leg to stand on anymore. Ryan raised an eyebrow. "You seem weirdly calm about this." I met his gaze and simply said, "I've got receipts." The table chuckled at that. Then, Natalie, another friend, spoke up unexpectedly. "You know, I ran into Derek the other day," she said, her tone casual, though her expression was sharp. The room went silent. "He didn't look too happy," she continued, swirling her wine. "Said things with Rachel weren't exactly working out." I sat up straighter. "What do you mean?" Natalie shrugged, playing it cool. "He didn't say much, just that it's complicated. But he definitely didn't look like a man in love." A slow wave of satisfaction coursed through me. The irony was almost poetic. Rachel had gambled everything for Derek, only to find herself losing that too. But the real twist came when Ryan pulled out his phone. "Speaking of receipts," he said, scrolling through his messages. "Check this out." He handed me his phone, and my jaw tightened as I read the screen. It was a screenshot of a message Samantha had sent him earlier that day. "Samantha, Rachel's panicking. Daniel's got her cornered. She thinks he's going to destroy her reputation." Ryan smirked. "Looks like she's sweating." I handed the phone back, a strange mix of emotions washing over me: satisfaction, yes, but also a tinge of sadness. Rachel was unraveling. A part of me wanted to take pleasure in that, but another part, the one that remembered the love, the laughter, the good years, felt strangely empty. The final encounter. A few days later, my phone rang. Rachel's name flashed on the screen. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity won. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice colder than I intended. There was a pause before she spoke. Her voice was softer than I remembered. Daniel, can we talk? In person. Suspicion laced my words. Why? Because she hesitated. I owe you an apology. I didn't trust her. But I agreed. We met at a park we used to visit back when things were good. She looked different, subdued. The confidence, the sharpness, it was all gone. I've been thinking, she began, staring at the ground. About everything. And I was wrong. About you. About us. I crossed my arms, making no effort to make this easy for her. Took you long enough? She flinched but kept going. I didn't expect her to ask for forgiveness. I wasn't sure I even wanted it. But there she was, standing before me, her voice trembling as she spoke. I don't expect you to forgive me, she admitted. I needed to say I'm sorry. For the lies. For the way I treated you. For everything. For a moment I found myself at a loss for words. This was the apology I had once longed for, yet now that it was finally here, it felt hollow, like an echo of something that no longer mattered. I appreciate the apology, I said at last, my voice steady, but it doesn't change anything. You made your choices, Rachel, and now we both have to live with them. She gave a small nod, tears brimming in her eyes. I know, I interrupted before she could say more. You don't get to rewrite this, not now. Her expression wavered, crumbling under the weight of regret. For the first time I saw real sorrow in her eyes. But it was too late. It didn't change what had happened. Without another word, I turned and walked away, leaving her behind in the park, nothing more than a faded memory of the woman I had once loved. As I drove home, an unexpected sense of peace settled over me. The life Rachel and I had built together had been reduced to ashes, but I was finally beginning to rebuild. And this time I was creating something stronger, something just for myself. The finalization of our divorce came without fanfare. No heated courtroom battles, no bitter confrontations, just a few signatures, a handful of emails between our lawyers, and the confirmation that we were no longer bound to each other. When Victoria sent the email confirming it was officially over, I stared at the screen for a long time. The words felt surreal. I had fought so hard to save our marriage, yet now it was simply done. But instead of the grief I had anticipated, I felt something else entirely: relief. The weight I had carried for years had finally lifted. With that chapter closed, I focused on cutting ties. I cleared the house of every trace of Rachel, clothes she had left behind, small trinkets that no longer held meaning, even the framed photos I had avoided looking at for so long. By the end of the day, the house felt emptier, yet strangely, it also felt more like mine. Most of her belongings were donated, except for one box, which remained taped shut in the garage with her name scrawled across it. If she wanted it, she could come for it. If not, it would stay there, forgotten, until I decided what to do with it. With Rachel gone, I turned my focus inward. I started going to the gym again, something I hadn't done in years. At first, it was just an outlet for frustration, a way to work through the lingering anger. But over time, it became more than that. Each weight I lifted, each mile I ran, made me feel stronger, not just physically, but mentally. I was reclaiming a part of myself that had been lost. I also reached out to old friends, the ones I had neglected while trying to hold my marriage together. Ryan, always true to his word, stuck by me, pulling me back into the world. He made sure I didn't isolate myself for too long. One evening, as we sat together over drinks, he clinked his bottle against mine. See, he said with a smirk. Told you there's life after Rachel. For the first time in what felt like forever, I laughed. Yeah, I admitted, a small smile breaking through. You were right. A few weeks after the divorce was finalized, I received an unexpected message. My phone buzzed, the screen lighting up with a number I didn't recognize. Unknown, Daniel, it's Derek. Can we talk? I stared at the message, my mind racing. Of all the people I could have imagined hearing from, Derek was the last. The man who had played a part in the downfall of my marriage was now reaching out to me. Against my better judgment, I replied. Me, what could you possibly have to say to me? Derek, please. I just need 5 minutes. Curiosity got the better of me. I agreed to meet him at a small coffee shop nearby, unsure of what he could possibly want. When I arrived, Derek was already seated, looking nothing like the confident man I remembered. His shoulders slumped, his complexion pale, he seemed defeated. Thanks for coming, he said as I sat across from him. Make it quick, I replied, folding my arms. He hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck before speaking. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. He exhaled sharply. I didn't know Rachel was married at first. And when I found out, I should have walked away. But I didn't. I said nothing, letting the silence stretch between us. She lied to me too, you know? His voice was edged with bitterness. Made me believe you were this terrible husband. that she was trapped in a marriage she didn't want. He let out a dry, humorless laugh. I believed her because I wanted to. My jaw tightened, but still, I stayed quiet. And now he continued, shaking his head, now I see her for who she really is. She's already moved on to someone else. Left me just like she left you. The words should have stung, but instead, they felt validating. Still, I didn't let him see that. What did you expect, Derek? I asked, my voice calm but firm. That she'd cheat with you but never cheat on you? He flinched, the truth hitting harder than he had likely anticipated. I guess I deserve that, he muttered. Yeah, I said, rising from my seat. You do. But it's not my job to forgive you. That's your burden, not mine. Without another glance, I walked away, leaving him sitting there, a shadow of the man who had once helped shatter my marriage. That night, I sat on my porch, watching as the sun dipped below the horizon. For the first time in months, I felt like I could finally breathe. The anger, the resentment, it still lingered, but it no longer controlled me. Rachel was gone. The life we had built together was gone. But I was still here, and for the first time, that was enough. I didn't have all the answers yet. I had no clear idea of what my next steps would be. However, there was one thing I understood with certainty. I was no longer the man who had once stood idly by while Rachel unraveled my life. Now I was stronger, wiser, and prepared to start anew. This wasn't the conclusion I had envisioned, but it was the one I needed. And as I stood there, watching the final streaks of sunlight disappear beyond the horizon, another realization dawned on me. The most important chapters of my story were still waiting to be written.